The greatest dynasty ever. 70s Habs versus 50s Habs. Who's better? 5 straight championships. It's a record in the NHL that has stood for over 60 years. And while the New York Islanders came close in the 80s, the 5-peat of the 1950s Montreal Canadiens has never been matched. They weren't just a team. For an entire generation, they were hockey. But what if the greatest team ever wasn't the one with the longest championship run? What if it was the team that was so statistically perfect, so untouchable, that they lost only 8 games in an entire 80-game season? The 1970s Canadiens didn't just win, they rewrote the definition of dominance. One franchise, 2 golden eras. Today, we finally settled the debate. Is true greatness an unbreakable streak of titles, or is it absolute statistical perfection? Case for the untouchables. The 1950s Canadiens. To really get the greatness of the 50s Canadiens, you have to picture the league they played in, the original 6. This was an era where you played the same 5 teams 14 times a season. There were no easy nights off, and that kind of familiarity bred some of the most bitter rivalries in sports history. And in that pressure cooker, one team didn't just survive, they thrived like no one had ever seen. From 1956 to 1960, the Canadiens won 5 straight Stanley Cups. This wasn't just a winning streak, it was a reign of terror. In those 5 years, they were so dominant that they never even saw a Game 7. Incredibly, they never trailed a playoff series in 5 years. It was total, uncompromising supremacy. This team was a who's who of hockey legends. At the heart of it all was the fiery Maurice "the Rocket" Richard, who was more than a superstar. He was a cultural icon whose scoring touch was matched only by his on-ice intensity. He was flanked by the elegant Jean Beliveau, whose grace and power defined the next generation of hockey stars, and his brother, the pocket rocket Henry Richard. Toss in the thunderous shot of Bernie Boom Boom Geoffrion, and you had an offense that could overwhelm anyone. But they weren't just about scoring. The 50s Habs were a defensive juggernaut. They had Doug Harvey, a man many of his peers called the best defenseman they had ever seen, who essentially reinvented the position and won 4 Norris trophies during the dynasty. And behind him stood Jacques Plante, the innovator in the net. He didn't just win the Vezina Trophy as the league's best goalie in all 5 of those championship seasons. He also changed the game forever by popularizing the goalie mask. Their power play was so absolute that it changed the rules. The Canadiens' power play was so deadly, often scoring 2 or even 3 goals on a single penalty, that the NHL had to bring in a rule change allowing a player to come back on the ice after 1 goal was scored. When you force the league to rewrite the rule book just to give other teams a chance, you're not just a dynasty, you're a force of nature. Now, let's jump to the powerhouse of the 70s. If that unbreakable streak defined the 50s team, the 70s team was defined by something else entirely: pure statistical perfection. This dynasty, which grabbed 4 straight cups from 1976 to 1979, played in a different world. The league had expanded, flooding the NHL with new teams and new talent. And in this bigger, tougher league, the Canadiens didn't just win. They hit a level of dominance that's still staggering to look at today. Let's just talk about the 1976-77 season, because it is, without a doubt, the single greatest season that any NHL team has ever played. The Canadiens finished with a record of 60 wins, 8 losses, and 12 ties. Just think about that, 8 losses in an 80-game season. That record for fewest losses still stands today, a monument to their invincibility. They outscored their opponents by 216 goals, the best goal differential in league history. This team was the brainchild of 2 of hockey's greatest minds, GM Sam Pollock, the architect, and coach Scotty Bowman, the master tactician. Bowman, the winningest coach ever, ran a system that blended speed, skill, and suffocating puck possession. On the ice, they were a symphony of brilliance. Leading the charge was the one and only Guy Lafleur, the Flower, whose flowing hair and explosive rushes made him the most exciting player on the planet. He wasn't alone. His line mate, Steve Shutt, was a pure goalscorer who potted 60 goals that magical 77 season. And the depth was just endless, with guys like Jacques Lemaire, Bob Gainey, and Yvan Cornwallis. On defense, they had the legendary Big Three: Serge Savard, Guy Lapointe, and the towering Larry Robinson. Robinson was an absolute monster who could shut you down physically and then burn you on offense, winning the Norris Trophy in 1977. And in goal stood Ken Dryden, the Secretary of State. He was calm, smart, and huge in the net, the perfect last line of defense for a team that barely needed one. He was the best goalie of his time, winning 4 Vezinas during the dynasty. The case for the 70s Habs is straightforward. They faced more teams and more competition, and put up numbers that seem unreal. They didn't just beat teams, they systematically dismantled them. Head-to-head comparison. So, how do these two colossal teams stack up against each other? Offense. This is a true clash of titans. The 50s team had the raw, passionate scoring of the Rocket and the graceful power of Beliveau. Their power play forced a rule change. However, the 70s team was a finely tuned machine. Led by Lafleur's breathtaking skill, they attacked in waves, with speed and precision. In their peak 76-77 season, they lit the lamp 387 times. While the 50s legends are icons, the sheer depth and systematic brilliance of the 70s offense probably gives them the edge. Defense. This is incredibly close. The 50s team was anchored by Doug Harvey, a true revolutionary on the blue line, and backed by the game-changing Jacques Plante. They owned the Norris and Vezina trophies during their run. But the 70s team rolls out the big three, Savard, Lapointe, and Robinson, a trio of Hall of Famers who could shut down anyone and turn defense into offense in a blink. And with Ken Dryden in net, they allowed only 171 goals in 76-77. It's a toss-up, but the collective force of the big three might just be the most complete defensive unit ever assembled. Dominance and legacy. This is the heart of the debate. What is true dominance? Is it the 5 consecutive championships in a fiercely competitive smaller league, a feat that has never been repeated, or is it the complete annihilation of a larger, expanded league? The 70s Canadiens' 68-12 record is proof of a team that had no equal on any given night. The 50s team was never pushed to a Game 7. The 70s team has the most flawless single-season resume in history. One represents hockey royalty, the other represents the perfect modern super team. So, after all that, who gets the crown? The 1950s Canadiens built their legend on iconic players and an unparalleled, unbreakable 5-year chokehold on the Stanley Cup. Their argument is simple and powerful. 5 straight. The 1970s Canadiens answered with a different brand of greatness. They faced a more competitive league and achieved a level of statistical perfection that seems impossible. Their 1976-77 season is the benchmark for every great team that's come since. Their argument is one of pure, suffocating dominance. It comes down to how you define greatest. Is it the untouchable championship record that stood the test of time? Or is it the single greatest peak of performance the sport has ever seen? I must admit, while the 50s team has the legendary streak, the 70s team's sheer perfection is almost impossible to argue with. But now I want to hear from you. Who was the greatest Canadiens dynasty? The 50s icons or the 70s juggernauts? Please let me know in the comments and explain why. Hey hockey fans, you can also follow my blog at https://tedtalkshockey.com and remember to keep your stick in the ice. Thanks for watching.